of the Cuyahoga County Districting Commission. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're calling the roll for the Tuesday, August 17th, 2021 Cuyahoga County Districting Commission meeting. It is now 3:06 p.m. Mr. Frost?
Here.
Mr. Cosell?
Here.
Mr. Lumpkin? Ms. Morgan?
Here.
Ms. Murphy? You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. And I want to mention at the outset, we're fortunate up here on the dais that with the plexiglass between members, we're able to remove our masks while we're seated and conducting the meeting. And any member of the commission is welcome to, if they'd like, for clarity and for everyone both here and online to be able to hear us. I do want to mention, though, any commenters who come up to the public forum microphone, due to the mask mandate, you will need to keep your mask on the entire time, whether while seated or giving public comment. So thank you all for your cooperation with the mask requirement. Our first item today, first item of business, is the approval of the August 5th meeting minutes. They have been distributed to all members. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Does anyone, I have one change, but does anyone else have any changes to recommend?
I don't have any.
I just wanted to note to the clerk on page 3 at the bottom, item D, the first paragraph there where it says, Mr. Kessel asked if Mr. Lumpkin would be willing to serve as chair. I did check it with Mr. Kessel. His recollection and mine are the same. It was me, Mr. Frost, suggested that we might see if Mr. Lumpkin was willing to serve as chair. So we can just make that one minor correction. Seeing no objection. All right, then with that one change, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Or actually as presented now, since we made that before the motion. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move that we accept the minutes, approve the minutes as
presented with that
as
one
presented.
change?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion? Well, first, was there any other discussion? There's not. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And one abstain. Thank you. So we have those minutes approved. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the main purpose why we're here today, which is to take public comment. Although we will get to more content, because we're very fortunate that in between when we set this date for the purpose of taking public comment, when we didn't know if we'd even have census data yet, the Census Bureau actually released the data late last week. So we are going to start with public comment today. That was the design for today, was to make this about hearing from the public before we get into our substantive business. I will say, though, that if you are someone who would like to make comment, but you want to hear the presentation on the census data first, you are welcome to wait and to hold your opportunity to make comment until what is shown on the agenda as item 5C. So you can choose which way you want to do it, but we did want to keep public comment up front as initially advertised, that we would be taking public comment before getting started. So with that, I will ask the clerk, do we have anyone who has signed up to be wanting to make public comment at this point in the meeting?
Ms. Lisa Check from the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland.
Thank you. Welcome.
Check. Oh, thank you. I am one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. League members in Cuyahoga County worked tirelessly for decades to achieve a county government with a representative legislative council, and League members all over Ohio worked just as hard to apply statewide constitutional reforms to the shameful way both parties since the 1960s have drawn Ohio's district lines. This is finally the year we'll see whether the statewide reforms will hold. But for the county, it'll actually be the third mapping go-round. So far, we've been very proud of our new form of county government, with county council members from all corners of Cuyahoga County, members who reflect the county's diverse population. We ask this body, the 2021 Districting Commission, to keep that principle of fair representation squarely before you as you make minor adjustments to district lines. In addition to census data, please factor in other desirable goals: political and ethnic equity, geographic compactness, communities of interest, and competitiveness. The League observer at your initial meeting, Susan Mernan, was pleased to see many hopeful signs of a cooperative and bipartisan spirit among commission members and assisting staff. Representatives of the League plan to attend all of your meetings so we can report your deliberations and progress to our members. We urge you, therefore, to observe scrupulously both the letter and the spirit of all open meeting and open record statutes. Every step of the process must be transparent. And because the League prefers to take action as well as observe it, we expect soon to submit to you a sample map of our own design, which we think can assist your deliberations. When we submit our map, we will request to present it with an explanation by our drafters of its features and rationale. Finally, we expect to comment further in public on whatever plan you ultimately produce. Thank you for this opportunity to make an initial statement to your commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any more public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Having and seeing no additional public commenters at that time, we'll move on to item 5 on our agenda, items of consideration. And a little bit of background, as I know all the commissioners are aware, the County Council undertook a procurement process to select a consultant to assist in this districting process. The County Council yesterday approved the selection of their vendor, our vendor now that we'll be working with, our strategy group. And so I don't know, Trevor or Jim, if there's any more background on that you felt we needed to give. Great. Thank you both for your assistance with that. I had the opportunity the other day to speak with Jeff Rusnick, the principal of our strategy group, and I want to welcome him to the podium. That thanks to the Census Bureau's early release of the data, he and his team are ready to introduce themselves to us and to the public and give us an initial overview. So, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Frost, and thank you to the members of the commission for taking on this not such an easy task in a very compressed time frame compared to previous cycles. This is not an easy job to do in a very short period of time. But what I wanted to do today was provide a summary or an overview of what we will be doing over the next 2 weeks, the work and the support that we'll be providing to the commission and to the community. And discuss today, we're going to talk about overall, present initial information and the steps that we're going to be taking, but also talk about the goals and build on what the League mentioned a minute ago. Introduce our team so you know who you're working with and the experts that you have, and they will provide an overview, an initial overview of the 2021 federal census data and what it means to this process. The process that they will engage, the technical experts will engage in, the timeline, as I mentioned, this accelerated timeline, some decision points that we suggest or would like the commission to act on and to move on. The next steps, the immediate next steps in this short time frame as well, and what those look like, and what an outreach and engagement process can look like in this 2-week period. Again, as I mentioned, we're operating in an unprecedented compressed time frame, but our goal, our hope is to get and gain as much public input as possible in that. Besides the principles, let me just bring up the PowerPoint here. Okay. So besides the principles that were outlined by the League of Women Voters, we will be subscribing to this goal. And that is a goal of a process that is open, transparent, fair, and accountable to the public. And so the work that we're going to be doing and embarking on and engaging will make sure to follow those principles throughout. I do want to introduce the entire team that we have today with us. So as Mr. Frost mentioned, my name is Jeff Rusnak. I'm the president and CEO of our strategy group, and we're overseeing this process overall. With us today, we have Kathy Berta, who's our vice president, Mike Thomas, Cala Bonanno, Destiny Henton, Minister Marcus Gould, and we also have on our team Ifealu Claytor, who will help us on outreach as well, but he is unable to be with us today. Joining us remotely are the technical experts, Tom Bonnier, who's the CEO of TargetSmart, Matt Cassidy with TargetSmart, and Michael Muller from Public Strategies. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about the data that we already have so far and the process that they will be using to start to prepare the maps. So, Michael.
Thank you very much. And just on an opening and before I dive into the data, I just want to thank the commission for the opportunity to serve. This is a critical responsibility, and we take it very seriously that our job here is to help on the tactical aspects for the commission to be able to deliver a fair and representative map. And as Jeff hit on the opening piece, in a very, very condensed time frame, but one that is very achievable. And just as a little short background on us at Muller Public Strategies and my colleagues at TargetSmart, for over a decade, we've worked on redistricting data and analytics as a group. And we have experience over a dozen states where we have worked on projects from a statewide basis, county, municipal, and school district level. So we really kind of take great pride in the track record. And I appreciate the comments in the front end from the League of Women Voters, because a big part of what we've been able to do is to make sure that minority representation and underrepresented communities, we find opportunities to make sure that we do wind up with a representative process as we go through this. And we work tirelessly to make sure that we don't face retrogression, which is often, frankly, even more important than the opportunities, because going backwards, obviously, is something we really try to ward against. And as we look at this process, we are deep in the data and analytics, but I think it's really important is that we respect that the on-the-ground reality is going to come from the commissioners, the public input, and it is our job to be able to take the data and analytics and working with the on-the-ground realities here to make sure that you wind up with a product that everyone can be proud of, because it's going to last for the next decade. And so it's really important to hear that feedback in a condensed time period. It's something that we're going to be very thorough and mindful to make sure that we leave no stone unturned, so that we deliver on the commitment for a fair and representative map. So with that, I'll dive into really what is job one, and it's the most obvious. We need to balance population. After receipt of the census data last week, in all honesty, one of the biggest challenges is that getting it shifted into a format that's usable, quickly is essential for this process, to work well. So that we're in a position to today start to discuss what do the districts actually look like. And as a result of it, I want to also acknowledge Matt Cassidy for our team did some amazing work, because the census data delivery is not always as simple as we would all like on our units of government that we have to work within. So it was a lot of work over the weekend to get us to a really good place to start. But I will go through on this chart some of the big highlights. In terms of balancing population, we start off with 4 districts that are already outside, which we'll talk about shortly, the acceptable deviation of plus or minus 5%. From the 2010 census, we were at an ideal district of 116,374. And now with the small population downward trajectory we've had, an ideal district would be 114,983. So that really means for us that we have a range of 109,234 people on a low end to 120,732 on a high end. And I've highlighted, there are the 4 districts that are outside the deviation that we need to balance to start. But I would look at it almost as 5 districts, because as you look at the 4 that are highlighted, District 1 has a deviation of 6%. District 6 has a deviation of 6.48%. District 8 has a deviation of 7.09%, and District 10 has a deviation of 5.64%. When you look at District 7, I would include that in our list because once we get to the simple task of balancing population, the fact that they are at 4.99%, I'm going to at least make the conservative assumption that we could very well get into simple population balances and be on the edge of deviation. In a perfect world, we will not just strive for plus or minus 5 in deviation. To the extent that is practical to follow, the historic policy on deviation, look, the goal is to be as strong as possible in these areas. So, we know we're working with plus or minus 5, but I would look at that as our fringes on the margins, and we're obviously going to try to, achieve as strong a number there, as possible. When we look at some of the population changes as been reported, as we can see, there are some, what I would consider, substantial, shifts. We, highlighted on there the population changes that are in the negative column, but looking at districts 7, 8, and 10 in particular, all cracked 5% on their own. So as we look at some of the adjustments that we need to make, one of the other considerations that we will get into, but we are very sensitive to, is the historic precedent of really trying to not disrupt population amongst districts, which last time was at 10.2%. But is something that we are going to obviously be sensitive to here, so that we aren't in a position that we are looking at major disruption as we go through population balancing as we go through this. So moving to the next slide, I want to talk about what we see amongst the districts. So amongst the preliminary demographics, I think it's important to note, we talked about this on the top of the presentation, how important it is for us to consider the minority representation. And this is one of the areas that in districts 7, 8, 9, and 10, are districts that clear 50% and then are majority Black or African American districts. And so looking at that, it's obviously important that we don't retrogress, dilute population, but also are mindful that we don't wind up in a scenario where we are packing population, as the phrase in redistricting parlance would go. District 11 would normally be classified as a minority opportunity district at the 45% level. I think it's one to take a look at as we go through the considerations, because this is where I think a lot of the conversations around community interest and how we wind up there, because from the data and analytics, it's split evenly amongst white population and Black or African American population. So I think this is going to be one of those districts that we have to look at in comparison to the last round of redistricting and what is the on the ground realities of that district as a whole. And District 3, I'll make a note of that the Hispanic population in the county primarily was put into the 3rd district, which allowed for the best opportunity for communities to be pulled together, it is a minority opportunity district when you consider the minority population that exists there. I think it's important to, take a look at how does that play out in reality, and I think it's something for the commissioners to consider and weigh, as we go through the process. So I'm going to ask that we move to the next slide, and we'll kind of get into a little bit of the process and a little bit more, of the details as we go through this. But from a redistricting the basics, we have this process every 10 years at the end of the decennial census that we need to balance population. We have a 5-member districting commission that is seated as we go through this process. And the commissioner's decisions in this process, are final and will be submitted to the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections on September 1st, where we will, move through this process in a very expeditious way. Next slide. And the principles for creating district boundaries, they are, legally established criteria that we need to follow. That includes substantially equal populations. And I think one of the considerations which, we will ask the commissioners is our deviation of plus or minus 5. Do we stay there? Is there, do we decide as we go through the process to make any adjustments? That'll be a commissioner's decision how they establish the criteria. Compact and contiguous territory. This is essentially one of the areas that, which obviously is, contiguous is making sure that we have, there is none of the areas are separated. They're one, unit of government by the time the district is drawn, and trying to make sure they are compact as possible so that we can continue a process of making sure that it is a reasonable and responsible approach. We have some limitations in this. We cannot divide voting precincts, and we need to combine governmental units, prioritizing townships, municipalities, city wards, and voting precincts, so that we are able to keep together government units as we go through this process, which can sometimes impact how compact you can draw a district. The commission may also, consider and establish some of their own criteria. And for example, we talked on the front end about underrepresented minority communities, making sure that we address that in the process is one of the considerations the commission can lay out. Establish a conditional criteria that can achieve an effective and efficient, accountable, responsive, and fairly representative government. Like that really is a determination of commissioners and public input. If there's an area that we can achieve a better representative map, which is the ultimate goal. And principles for creating district boundaries, and to touch on the communities of interest. Communities of interest can really be developed in a lot of different ways, but it's really, you're looking at a group of interest, that have comparable governmental or community concerns that would benefit from cohesive representation. And some of the factors are economics, the culture, geography, race, education, ethnicity, religion, other historic identities. And I often, when we look at these areas, this is a place where, as we go through this process, this is where the on the ground and public input is so important, because this is an area where, frankly, some of those decisions that are made in this process with public input that really can give the color and context to different elements here can really be helpful of finding a way to make improvements in the map that are not going to be obvious to just data tracks alone. And important, you cannot consider in this, when you think about communities of interest, political partisanship, electoral considerations. This is meant to really think about this from a community perspective, not a political perspective. And so a quick run through in the 2011 timeline. The census data was released in April of 2011. I think we all wish we had the data 4 months ago, but the realities of 2021, we are faced. The commission members were appointed and redistrict consultants in June of 2011. And the commission met 9 times, received public input, considered 8 different map plans, and the final plan was approved in September of 2011. Next slide. And I want to go through the criteria, which on the top of this, we've talked about. There was a districts had a population deviation of 5%. Average district, as I talked about on the top of this presentation, was 116,374. Districts based on the commission's criteria was neither pack nor dilute African American or Hispanic residents. Number of residents being assigned to new districts should be minimized. Wound up with a 10.2% shift on the average. No community should be divided between districts except for the city of Cleveland due to the size of population. And out of respect to voter preference, council members should, if possible, continue to represent their current districts. Next slide. And looking at some of the outcomes, each of the districts stayed within the plus or minus 5 on deviation. More than 60% of residents in 4 of the county council districts were African American, and half of the county's Hispanic population was drawn into a single district. And the percentage of residents reassigned to new districts was 10.2% countywide. So as we look forward to the 2021 redistricting process, as we have all talked about, the compressed timeline, the data release on August 12th, which was 4 months later, it was released the last go around, put us on a much more compressed timeline. Commission members were appointed on August 3rd. District consultants selected on August 11th. And we are working towards a final district approval on September the 1st. And to speak to the process, which I've hit on some of this along the way, but I think it's really important as we think about how we approach this. The commission has the authority to create criteria that they believe will help for a fair and representative map, for the people that reside here. And as we go through this, the final considerations are going to evolve through public input and feedback through the process. And the final plan will likely be very different than initial attempts to balance population. And I want to expound on that a little bit, because this is actually, I think, one of the, the big challenges when you first balance population. And this is, I feel it's very much the data and mapping exercise is very simple. That is one of the what we would look at from our end, technically a part that is, can be done very quickly. And the first iteration of a map, we will definitely get there, in a way that's very expeditious. I think what's really important as we go through this is that the iterations to follow on a lot of levels are really going to, be very much based on, what we hear in these rooms in this very transparent and open process. And we're looking forward to hearing that. And I really look at the process that we go through here and some of those changes that we go. Last time there was 8 map draws. I think from our perspective, I wouldn't put a limit or a cap on it. We are going to be responsive. It will be a short timeline, but maps that we plan to be ready for by August 23rd after this initial feedback. We far from look at that as close to end of the process. On some levels, we look at that as the beginning, and then there is going to be, frankly, a very robust week ahead of us, where we plan to be very responsive, to the wants and needs here of the commission. And looking at the key dates moving forward, here as I will run through, we'll be back in 2 days with the next commission meeting. And then we are going to be working earnestly in the days ahead on creating initial maps that we will be able to deliver in time for our Monday meeting, with some of the important feedback that we're going to get today and Thursday to kind of get this process really rolling. There'll be development of a microsite, which obviously is really important for the transparency in this process. And as we go through the presentation of initial maps, we are going to, really look forward to getting the input, because we are going to encourage constructive criticism through this process. We want to make sure that we get it, that we get this right, and we really look forward to working together with everyone through that process. And as we continue to solicit input and we go through the data analysts as we will, move through this process, you will see a new round 3 days later on the Thursday on that week on August 26th. With alternatives off of the feedback on the 23rd. So we are, prepared to move quickly. And then the commission meeting on August 30th, I expect a similar process as we are then, careening quickly to our final, maps that will be ready to be transmitted to the Board of Elections. And some of the key decision points for the commission as we look at this moving forward is the population criteria, which I referenced before, the ±5. Should that still apply? Is that something that should be under consideration, for change? We've been through processes where, deviation can be, restrictive of accomplishing some of the best community goals. So, ultimately that will be in the commissioner's hands, and whatever they decide, we will then, work quickly to move through this. I think it'll be important for us to also understand, should minority, opportunity districts crack 60%? Are we on some levels boxing us in at too high a population threshold? This is a question for commissioners and public input to consider. Where do we land on that question? Should we attempt to put the Hispanic population of more than 50% into one single district? And should we convene regional meetings to increase public participation and input? And this is some starting thoughts from our perspective, but I believe in further comment today, we will probably get a lot more feedback on some other ideas for consideration. And the next steps on map drawing is that we will have a thorough demographic report before drawing the initial map iterations. That's one of the things we're working through very quickly as we unpack the census data. We will begin balancing populations. I say as we will begin. We've already been working very, very quickly to look at it, as you could see from the data we were able to present today. Identify the location of county council members to avoid pairing of incumbents as we move through the process is obviously essential for respecting the will of the voters, and incorporating commission and public feedback from this week's meetings as we will prepare for the initial map iterations for the August 23rd meeting.
And thank you, Michael. I'll move through a few more items quickly, and then we can take questions. I'm sure you have several questions for Michael and other members of the team. So in terms of outreach and engagement, we still are, given this compressed time frame, we are still committed to an open, transparent, accountable, and frankly, robust process here. We believe there's a strong need to make sure and ensure that there are multiple and convenient opportunities for the public to participate and to provide their input. And that is why one of the points of consideration for today is whether to convene meetings next week, public meetings on a regional basis. We had proposed doing 3 of them, one on the east side, one on the west side, and one south. If at all possible, it's possible they could be as part of these meetings. These meetings could be moved to sites outside of downtown to allow for that participation. In addition to that, as Michael mentioned, we are in the process of building, it's really not a microsite, it's a fairly comprehensive website that will be a placeholder for multiple pieces of information. And so our goal really is, in addition, is to conduct outreach to stakeholders, organizations, and individuals to make sure that they're included in the meetings and to encourage and solicit their input into this process, because it is important that the community has that opportunity. The website itself that we're building, as I said, is going to be pretty comprehensive and robust, and it will be a hub for all information related to the process. It'll provide an overview. It'll provide information about the commission members, the process for drawing the maps, the requirements and the legal requirements. The data will be housed there, as well as the maps that are presented. It'll be a media center so that the media has access to all this information as well, but it will also be a place for public comment and input, frankly. And so that's, in this 2-week process, that's what we're going to be doing and working on. And we're open to additional suggestions and ideas from the commission as well. But I would like to open it up to questions.
Mr. Chair.
My microphone wasn't on. Do any of the commission members have questions for Mr. Rusnak, Mr. Mueller, or any of the other members of his team? Not seeing any questions right now. Oh,
Chair?
Ms. Morgan, yes.
Thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Lumpkin first, actually. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I noticed that there were 5 items that you listed on criteria going forward, a 5% deviation, minority districts, 50% Hispanic region. So those things are things that you will seek to incorporate, or these are things that you are now just looking at to evaluate, see whether or not these can be incorporated in your evaluation?
So I can ask Michael or Tom to weigh in on this, but one is the 5 points I think that you're referencing were the 2011 criteria. And it's my understanding that the commission in general has suggested or has taken a position that they're using that as a basis or as a starting point is where you want to begin this process this time.
So these are this basis or starting point from
Yes.
going forward. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lumpkin. Ms. Morgan.
Thank you. I wonder when the website will be available and when we'll have access to it.
Without over-promising, our goal and our hope, fingers crossed, is that we will be live Thursday, or Thursday's meeting.
Thank you.
And I will add to Mr. Lumpkin's question, I think one of the things that we were talking about, or at least that was raised or suggested, was a consideration of whether that 5% range is correct or it should be adjusted. It could go up or it could go down, frankly. It could go to 6%. I think if I remember correctly, there's one district where it's 4.99%, so it's right below that. So, you could make a determination to change that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how we came to that 5% the first time, but there's been significant changes in the community since that 5% was developed as a baseline. So I guess as we move forward, we'll be able to look and see whether 5% is a reasonable number or not a reasonable number.
Right. Thank you. Good comment. Are there other questions from those or other commission members? Mr. Rusnak, just one question, and as you've touched upon significantly, in addition to assisting the commission with the data, you're also assisting with the public engagement side. And part of that, I know there may be members of the media here or observing, and I know the answer, but I'd like to ask you to specify who would be the person the media would contact if they have questions and want more information about this process.
Sure, thank you. Mike Thomas from our team, who is back here, will be the contact for the press. His cell phone number I'm going to give out without asking him, but 216-272-3638. And his email address is mike@ourstrategygroup.com, mike@ourstrategygroup.com. And so we will be preparing a press release and press materials, which will have his name and contact info listed on it. And should anybody get a call or have questions, you can certainly refer to Mike.
Great, thank you. I knew that answer. I want to thank Mr. Thomas for reaching out to me directly on that issue, and to compliment you, Mr. Rusnak, and your team for being so accessible and for ramping up so quickly to have some information for us to consider already today.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.
What we're going to move on to, and I'm going to ask you to hold on what would have been item 3 of your presentation, which would be considering public comment we may have received. What we're going to do now is open up to take additional public comment, as I had said at the outset. And I just want to clarify for anyone delivering public comment, while Mr. Rusnak and his team are here in making public comment, please address your comment to the commission. It would get unwieldy if we're engaging in dialogue between the commenter and our consultant. So please direct your comment to the commission. And our next step after we complete this term of taking public comment is we'll then be working right here in open session with Mr. Rusnak and team, with our strategies group and their co-consultants to consider the public comment we received today. And again, as I've said, I said earlier today in promoting public comment for today, this isn't the last public comment we'll take. There will be opportunity at every meeting we do, every meeting we hold, to take additional public comment. So with that, to the clerk, is there any additional public commenters at this time?
At this time, Lou.
Thank you. Please come on up to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. As I told you in the last initial meetings that I will be here ask some strange questions. Here I am. I understand that our census is a very helpful tool to help everybody. And we know in our region, the inequity on everything has been accumulated for decades. So should we only consider ethnic population as the sole main factors we consider how to draw our district? Or we also consider some other factors which will help overall populations in this county. For example, for health inequities, would you be able to consider the people in certain areas, we have more people with certain health issues? Maybe it's not like a pandemic as COVID-19, but it could be kind of epidemic in our area. Now, the other big thing, before the census started, question about your status being LGBTQI+, should we really consider that too? Because lots of people nowadays, we know, among the homeless population, the younger ones, lots of them identify themselves in that category. And that's why they are away from voting, away from participations in the public affairs, because they think that they have been denied by the society. At the same time, I can assure you, in our homeless shelter, actually lots of older LGBT population in their whole life, they have never been recognized. And that's how they can end up homeless for a long time. This is also a very big factors for that. So should we consider all these factors, which will really help us to get the equity level increased? I hope this will help you, but I know it will complicate the matters, but I think we should make an effort on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment at this time?
No further public comment has been submitted.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Rusnak, whether you or another member of your team, looks like we may have one other one. Please, come on up.
Hello, I'm Linda Mayer from the League of Women Voters. And your including of public comment, I have 3 little questions. But the first one is if you're following the procedure that the county council uses to listen to a presentation which announces ahead of time that they have something to say, and they say a prepared statement, and then there's no feedback and no no give or take. And then we sit down again and the council moves on to the next business, and it sort of drops like a lead balloon. So what I'm suggesting is maybe the public could be more interactive. I'm not sure you need to follow the process that the council uses, although it's helpful, I think, to keep the amount of public input within reasonable balance. There's somehow a balance. So that's one thing I wanted to say, but I would love to hear feedback back and forth rather than just speaking to the wall. I have another question, and that is, in the census, I was out on the hustings trying to get people to sign up for the consensus at a homeless shelter. No, it was not a shelter. It was a place where people go for lunch. And I am painfully aware from personal experience that there is a huge undercount in this year's census. So I wanted to ask the consultant if it's at all possible to take into consideration the parts of the city where they got the least submissions of census data, because the undercount is quite striking in the year 2020 due to the massive uprooting of the population and all the illness. So that's my second question. And my third question is the no-no that we have been told we cannot mention political party registration. So, but there's nothing to prevent the public from mentioning it. So I just would like to hope that, at least in quiet discussions, you are considering that we need to have bipartisan or nonpartisan representation in our county council, because a one-party place is not a good place. It never is. It doesn't matter which party it is. It's important to have dialogue and back and forth and different points of view and different eyes watching the large government that we have here in the county. So please do consider that we continue to have a variety of voices on our county council and not just monopolies. So those are my three questions. I would have loved to throw them out and ask the consultant to speak to them, but I'm not sure the format. I also have a colleague with me who has a number of questions himself, and he is our map drawer, and so he will want to ask questions as well of the consultant. So hopefully he can ask his questions as well.
Thank you.
So thank you.
I think we'll address some of that momentarily. Let me see if there's additional public comment to the clerk. Are there additional commenters at this time?
I didn't receive any additional public comment, but is the gentleman, would you like to come up and state your name?
My name is Peter Petto. I'm from the Bay Village League of Women Voters, and I had a couple of comments in the form of questions for the consultant, if that's possible. The first is, I've been engaged in drawing a number of maps, community of interest maps and others, for the state, and I've been told that we're waiting to do some more careful map drawing for data to be processed by Ohio University that will give us precinct level population and demographic data. And I'm curious whether our map makers here are going to have that processed for Cuyahoga County before then, and whether the website will have the ability for us to give community input by manipulating those maps, with that data underlying it. The three more questions that are fairly short. The consultant mentioned districts that are compact as possible. I'm curious whether the consultant considers the current districts to be as compact as possible. The consultant talked about combining government units, and I wondered if there's some hierarchy for combining government units, wards, precincts, municipalities, and so forth. And my last question is, he talked about neither packing nor diluting, and I'm wondering, is that packing, what is the basis for comparison of packing and diluting it? Is it compared to what we have right at the moment? Or is it compared with what we have countywide, or is there some other ruler for comparison? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. To the clerk, is there any additional public comment at this time?
Is there any additional public comment from our public sitting in the audience? At this time, no. No further public comment.
Great, well, thank you. And I had a couple of comments, but I wanted to see if any other commission members have any comment about the comment we've received already.
Yes, I do. As I'm way out of my comfort zone, this is all new to me. So when you ask for feedback, when you ask about feedback, I consider what I'm doing right now is gathering information, listening to you, listening to the consultant, listening to my fellow commission members here. I'm just learning a lot. For instance, in the presentation, they talked about the 5% deviation of population. Obviously, every district cannot have 114,983 members. Theoretically, that would be the ideal. Numerically, that would be even. So what is a valid deviation of that number? Is it 5%? Is it more or less? I don't know yet. So I'm taking in information to learn about what's the best way to do that. And same with some of the other comments that were made by the public. I'm just learning right now about what's the best way to process all of this information. So do my best to listen to what you and everyone else have said and make a good, fair decision after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kessler. Anyone else have any remarks?
I think those were all very good questions, good concerns. I think there will be, as time go on, there will be more interaction between the public and ourselves as well as the consultants. I think we have to give the consultants an opportunity first to put the data together and to present their preliminary findings. During the course of that, I think those questions about homelessness, feedback, about the issues that you raised, whether or not the methodology that we're using is correct in today's world as opposed to using the same methodology that we used 10 years ago. So I think all of those questions will be asked. I think we must first give the consultants an opportunity to present their initial findings. But I think, again, those questions are good. They heard you today, and I think they'll come back to us. That's the reason why I think one of the reasons why we're doing 2 days a week rather than one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other remarks?
Well, I don't have anything to add to the remarks that my colleagues have shared because I think they're spot on. And I would just say I agree. I think this is a fact-finding opportunity for us. We're taking in an awful lot of information and learning a lot. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, there'll be quite a lot of interaction between all of us, I'm sure. And many of the questions that you've brought forward are very thought-provoking and will help us as we craft our thoughts and ideas when we address the data. So thank you for that, and I agree with my colleagues.
So seeing no other, and Mr. Rusnick, before we have you come back up, I want to also address, I think you raised some good points there, and I want you to know, as has already been said, not only have you been heard, but one of the things that the county council has done in allowing us to avail ourselves of the services of our strategies group, what we already had on the agenda today was to have the time that we're going to get to right now for consideration of the public forum comment. So we have designed this way. In terms of running a meeting, it can get not only a bit unwieldy, but even potentially unfair to other commenters to have any one commenter engaging in a lot of back and forth with the body. But you will see that we've heard you. You also, it's why I reiterated earlier, that every meeting will have public comment in it. And so since you can see here at the outset, we are being very intentional to be sure we're considering public comment. If you make comment that by the time we're getting to later meetings, you feel we've forgotten or ignored, you still have that opportunity to say, by the way, there's a point I made that I haven't heard you all talking about. Because, and this is the final point I'll make in response to those great points you've raised, you mentioned at one point, maybe in our quiet meetings that we have, we could discuss this or that. Well, we don't have any other meetings. Every meeting that we have will be held right either here or maybe at other locations, as has been discussed. But every meeting we have will be held openly in public with you and others having the opportunity to hear what's being discussed and how we address those. And so you've raised great points. And I hope what you find is at least a half measure, if not more, of what you're looking for in terms of consideration of the input you bring to this process. And with that, I think it's a perfect opportunity to bring Mr. Rusnick back up for the consideration of public forum comments. And I would ask you, not just, and I'm sure you're already there in your mindset as well, Jeff, not just considering what we've heard today, but also generally how your team plans to approach the consideration of public comment process of our meetings.
Right. So we are hoping that you will agree to take the meetings outside of this this facility and take them out, frankly, into the field to give people more opportunity to present and participate, so they don't have to come downtown and that they are closer to them and easier to access. And so that we would not only have a continuation of these meetings, but as the team is putting together the information, they could then present it and get reaction and feedback in real time. And frankly, some of the questions that came up today, I think are perfectly legitimate and reasonable questions for our experts to assist us in addressing and answering in short order. As you mentioned, I think we have a meeting this week, another meeting this week. There are 2 meetings scheduled for next week. We would propose, if possible, that we expand that to 3 meetings, given the short time frame, so that we could fulfill having 3 regional meetings next week, or in lieu of that, putting another meeting on the week of the, perhaps the 30th and the 31st as a possibility as well. But in these meetings, presentations would be made by the experts, data would be presented, and then they would be an opportunity to provide input and feedback, and as well as the website. Don't forget that the website will be live and you will have data presented there. I hope that the team that's with us remotely can add in a little bit of detail on that and what to expect when that information will be able to start posting and what information will be contained there as well. So either Tom, Michael, Matt. I don't know if you can jump in. There it is.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff. So in terms of the question specifically around the data that can be made available, I mean, what we're working on is as Michael alluded to, the census data release wasn't released in the most ideal format. So our team has been working to put that together. So, but we do anticipate having the data available. There was a question asked in the third comment in terms of the ability to manipulate that. I think that's a bit more of a challenge just given the time frame. But in terms of the actual data and reports on the population for the districts and subcomponents, we do anticipate being able to make that available via the website.
Thank you.
And I should add, if there's other data in the reports that the commission would like us to explore the ability to make available or through public comment, people would like to see, we're certainly interested in that feedback. Would like to make anything available that we can get our hands on. Just again, we're working within these much more limited time constraints, so not everything will be possible, but we want that that feedback, certainly.
Now, Mr. Rusnak has raised a couple of times the idea of regional meetings, and I think we should address that. Other than that subject, though, are there other questions that commissioners have for Mr. Rusnak or the others on the team about the public comment and the engagement part of their scope?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question about the website. If someone from the community is apparently allowed to communicate on that website, correct?
There will be a sign-up form and a way to provide input. There's a form that I think that the county has for input, for submitting. It could be a question. I don't think it's, at the moment, it's going to be taking like a submission of a map.
Okay, but it could be a question.
Right.
And how will we respond to that?
So we'll look at every question that comes in and figure out the best way to address it. So our team will get those questions, field them, and direct them to the appropriate person.
And they be shared?
Yes,
with the
everything will be
commission as
shared
well.
with the commission. Yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions commissioners may have or comments? All right, well, let's consider this very, I think, innovative idea for us to, let's get out of downtown and let's hear what residents have to say. What do other commissioners think about that proposal? Sure, Ms. Morgan.
I think it's a fine idea. The question I have is, will we have meetings downtown in addition to external meetings, or are we essentially pushing those meetings that we had originally scheduled for here out into the community?
Sure, and I think that's to some degree for us to determine, but.
Well, I'm just wondering what everyone's thoughts are on that.
I got the impression that it was in addition.
So just to clarify, if I may, what I was recommending is that your next week's meeting, your schedule, I think if I remember correctly, the schedule is Monday, Thursday, that those two meetings we would move out into the field, potentially consider adding a third meeting so we could cover all regions of the county. And then you would, because this Thursday's meeting is downtown, and then your final week meeting is also scheduled to be downtown. If you could only get two meetings in next week, we would at least suggest a consideration of another meeting in the last week that you may have to going back-to-back dated on the 30th and 31st.
And by the way, we conceivably, I mean, this depends on all of our availability and schedules. We could also add one later this week if that were the better time
Certainly,
to add.
yep.
Yeah. For me, I think that this week, of course, they're always busy. Every week is busy. This week would be okay for me. Next week would be, I'm treading on thin ice because it's the beginning of the academic year. And, of course, we're welcoming all the students back to campus, hooray, and starting to teach. So next week would, I would think for me, the only day other than Monday and Thursday would be Friday.
Okay.
Actually, I take that back. Maybe Wednesday.
And I guess maybe as a threshold of where we are we in agreement as a commission that we'd like to do regional meetings and that we'd like, as a start, to take our Monday and Thursday meetings next week and hold those out somewhere other than downtown?
I have mixed feelings about it. I'm certainly not opposed to being transparent and hearing from the public. But it seems like, and I realize that there's an advantage of being closer to people in their own neighborhood, but it seems like with the website, there's plenty of opportunity for the public to be heard. No, you don't have to travel. I'm just wondering how valuable that might be.
There are some people, there are a number of people who may or may not have access to technology or who may not know how to effectively use it. And so in those instances, it's a nice idea to, just to be present and allow them to speak to us.
Yeah.
Ms. Murphy?
I would definitely support outreach in other areas of the county. I'm just concerned what we're going to be able to have to share with them, and that we can, really make it a purposeful meeting to
Yeah, I
have,
agree with that, too.
so those are my concerns, but I definitely think it would be a great idea.
Yeah, it's such a truncated period, right? I mean,
Yes.
we're like learning and doing at the same time. And so, I guess the thing is that we will be bringing everyone along with us, right? We'll all be in it together.
Exactly.
Mr. Lumpkin, any comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, I just, when do we want to start this, next week or this week?
Well, that's a very good question. I wanted to see if we had unanimity or at least if no one
I was thinking
strongly
about,
objected to going out into the community.
no, I don't have any objections either. I just was thinking about the logistics of it and whether or not everyone here can pull that type of meeting together in such a quick time and make it beneficial to everyone in this room. So if you're going to do it, an outreach out, let's say in Rocky River or somewhere like that, do this staff have enough time to pull all of that together? And at the same time, gather all the information we need to process. So, but other than that, I mean, I'll go along with what the group, whatever the group thinks.
Mr. Lumpkin makes a great point, and I assume you wouldn't be making the recommendation
Right.
without having thought through this.
Right.
I have a similar concern that, we need to make sure the public meaningfully knows where we're going to be. And also, we have the use of this great facility here with the technology and everything built in to make sure the public who attends can participate and be informed in our meetings. So it's kind of, we're in your hands.
It is a challenge, if I may respond, it would be a challenge, but we believe that we can find appropriate facilities either through the community colleges or other facilities, or colleges, I should say, and maybe some other community centers or community gathering places as well. But we have a team of folks that are ready to help with outreach to try and engage the public and bring them into this process further. And hopefully, if we go out, if we take the meetings out to the people, it does make it easier for them to attend. So
I think Mr. Nani from the county had a comment for us, if you may.
Just to add, and I'll start by saying anything is possible, so just keep that in mind. But if we're taking the meeting out in the community, we have IT issues. We always live stream these meetings, and we just want to have a little bit of time to talk to the IT people about how to set that up. I believe we can do it remotely, but I just want to make sure that you folks understand that there's a couple more steps involved with doing a road show.
And that's a point that's very well taken. Thanks for that. So I guess my question is, I mean, saying that anything is possible sometimes is easier said than done. And so I wonder if by Thursday you would have a skeletal schedule for us
Sure.
to be able to tell us where, when, who the contact people are, and how you propose sharing the information with the communities.
right, so we can talk about potential locations and find out logistically or technically if that's possible to do it, and address the other questions as well. We would come back with 3 potential sites and timing.
All right, and I would think that they would have to be pretty well nailed down, so that if we gave the go-ahead, that it would be a yes, and they would be organized then.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the state, I don't know if you noticed, the state did announce in very short order their process and the public meetings that they're doing. So they are also working to do these in a similar time frame, although they have a little more time and a bigger area to cover. So.
Well, I'll put it this way, with the compressed time schedule, I would have not, as a commissioner, wanted to ask you to now take us out on the road. But given that you have come to us with this proposal, then I think really in the spirit of what we are charged with doing, I would like to say yes to that proposal that you've made. And so I think the remaining thing we need to figure out is when can we add in an additional meeting? And I know we're all going to need to be looking at our schedules. So it does seem to me that adding one later this week is probably not going to be easily done. I mean, we're going to need till Thursday just to start figuring things out, and with meeting notice requirements, that's probably our least desirable option, is adding one this week. So looking at next week, and already having heard from Ms. Morgan that her only availability next week would be the Friday.
Yes, I commend that and say either Wednesday or Friday.
I was going to say, I've got my own unavailability both Tuesday and Wednesday, at least until after about 4 p.m. either day. I could do a later meeting. But would we like to look at adding something? I guess our first option is either Friday, the 27th, or Tuesday, the 31st. Are either of those days workable for all members? 31st is not. Okay, good for you.
Talking evening or?
At least afternoon or evening, yes.
But that was my thought too, that, if we wanted people to be able to be present, many people are working at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so perhaps an evening time would be better.
Yeah, we may want to push each of these later, which it sounds like it goes easier on your schedule. It does on mine as well, so.
Yes, I can make that work, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, what are we looking at Friday, or what, that's problematic for me, but I'm gonna try and make it work depending upon the time.
Now that we're talking about the time and hearing from Ms. Morgan and me as our schedule, if we were looking at 5 p.m. or later, I'm good Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday.
Okay.
Friday, 5 p.m. or later is a tough time to get people to come to anything other than something fun. How do we all look at 5 p.m. or 5:30 or so on Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday works better for me. Tuesday is, again, we'll be greeting the freshmen
Right.
and feeding them ice cream.
Oh, good.
At 5 o'clock on Tuesday.
5 would be excellent for me, but I'm not sure how it would be for the public. 5 o'clock. Are you gonna take public comments? Are you planning on taking any public comments during that time, or just gonna be meeting?
I think we'll be dual purpose, kind of like we ended up being today, that we're going to have our working meeting and take public comment all in one location. So Wednesday evening, looking doable for everyone? And then how do we feel about the Monday and Thursday times? They were set at 3 p.m. Do we want to move those to be similarly? Do we want to have all three of these start at 5 p.m. or later? Is that better, worse?
I'm ambivalent, Mike. I've already got it on my calendar for those days, so whatever time works for everyone else on Monday and Thursday is fine by me. I do have it on my calendar scheduled from 3 until 7. So anytime is fine. And on Wednesday, I'm good as well.
I do think that if we have one or more earlier in the day and one a little later, there are some people who can come in the afternoons, but for whom maybe evening isn't better. So I don't know that we have to have them all later. Any strong feelings about moving the Monday or Thursday times? You want to keep them at 3 where we had them?
I'm all right. I'm up. I can do either one. Just those.
I think once we have maps to start working with or working from, I would prefer longer meetings too. I think we'll have something to work with and have better discussion even. And if those run into the evening, people might be able to show up
Right.
later, They have to be there for the whole meeting.
All right. So I want to summarize where I think
Keep
we
them
are.
earlier.
Would be next week to have a meeting at 3 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd, a meeting at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 25th, and a meeting at 3 p.m. on Thursday, the 26th, all three of which will be held out, one east, one west, one south, roughly, with precise locations. And I would also say if we could give Mr. Rusnick and team even a little flexibility on time before we get too nailed in, but trying to adhere to those meeting times and having heard the comments from the commissioners.
I did hear the comments, so we'll take it, do the best we can with that direction.
And to have, well, hopefully a skeleton of that schedule
Right.
for us to consider on Thursday.
Yes. Absolutely.
And for any members of the public or media who are listening to this, so we did have that recommendation from our consultant. We're taking that recommendation. But the final decision on when and where those meetings will be, we anticipate finalizing that and announcing that on Thursday, and then very publicly making that available to anyone who wishes to participate in any of those meetings. So those are some tentative discussions right now that we will have final decision on Thursday. Thank you for that recommendation.
Thank you.
I think that completes our items of consideration, and we will now move on to any miscellaneous business. Does any commissioner have any items to come before the commission? I'm not seeing any. All right. Well, that brings us to adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved. So moved by Mr. Lumpkin. In a second. All in favor of adjourning, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.